To make the custom recess section here in this ring, here's the following pieces of what you're going to need. A piece of wax paper or foil, paper, a lunch bag, scissors, some vegetable oil spray, your 5-minute epoxy, and something to mix your epoxy with. First thing you want to do is remove your assembly here. Remove your ring, as shown. Bring up your slip joint washers. Take some of your cooking oil. Spray the bottom with it lightly. Okay, if you have a little bit of excess much there, you just take your finger and wipe the vegetable oil around. This will serve as a lubricant so that the epoxy will not stick to your tube. And once you have done that, take your one cut ring here, place it on the bottom. It also does help to sand the inside of your escutcheon ring here so the epoxy will hold to it. Then put your ring on the bottom here. Be sure not to get the inside of the escutcheon or the ring here with wet with the vegetable oil, or else the epoxy will not stick. And then take your upper assembly here, slide it over, and just kind of push down on it just so that your escutcheon is sitting properly. Remove the assembly. Give a little spray on your aluminum paper here, and your aluminum foil. So this is just so that the epoxy will not stick to the foil. At the opposite end where the bag closes, cut a very small hole in one of the corners of the bags. You could have used your syringes for this, but we're going to save those for a later time if needed. Mix up a large amount of epoxy. Take the epoxy and put it inside the bag. And then, like a chef decorating a cake, inject the epoxy around your ring. Then let the epoxy cure. Okay, now that our epoxy has cured here on our ring, we can now pull it off. Now if you use enough vegetable oil on here, it should be lubricated enough to where it will come off. Some wiggling may be required just to kind of break it free. And then you just give it some pulls, and there it is. Now the inside of our ring here is filled with epoxy, and now that the inside of this here now is the same diameter as our aluminum tube. Now it is important that when you do put epoxy in here that you do not have a bead or a pool of vegetable oil here on the bottom of this, because when it does, it will not look right. So you can see that I can put this back on, fair amount of ease, which is perfect. Now I'm going to go upstairs and give these a wash because all the vegetable oil is all over this and the tube itself. If you want to, you can remove these just to wash the entire tube and wash these too, so that you don't ruin your project. So let me go wash these. Alright, I'm back from washing my items here. I washed my newly filled in ring here. I washed my saber handle. And for the heck of it also, I also washed my other cut ring and my 1 3/4 cut bottom ring here for my tube. Now it's important that you don't want to get oil on everything because it can ruin your project. I also sanded my epoxy filled ring here with my Dremel felt wheel. Just take it into the tool and just put it inside, and then just give it a nice nice sanding. It will not take off too much, but it'll just take off enough to where it will be easier to place your ring onto your tube. So you see it glides down fairly easy. But when you pull it out, you may have to give it a little wiggle to get it off. And also the epoxy here may want to come out of the ring. It's normal, so you don't have to worry about that so much. So now I'm going to show you how to make the recess section here in this ring. Take your epoxy ring and make a line from the top to bottom here as well as the bottom here. What we do is we have to make measurements so we can make our notches in here. For our top section where it comes in together here, we want it to be 1 1/8. So half of 1 1/8 is going to be 5/8. So if here's my 5/8 mark here on my ruler, I want to make a mark here on one corner, and my 1 1/8 I want to make it one over here. Now I have one mark here and one mark there. On the bottom, you want it to be about 1 inch. So again, we're going to take our mark from here. Here's my 1/2 inch mark. And on one corner here, mark it where my ruler meets the ring. And on the other side here for my 1 inch. On my ring here, you can see where I brought my marks up here. On the bottom edge here, where it measures 1 inch from this side to this side, take a marker and bring your marks halfway up the ring on both sides. On the top section, where it's much wider, take your marker and draw a line from here to meet your first mark. Now this is going to be a little sharp, or like a half circle or so, but you're going to want to kind of take it and just kind of draw it out like that. Draw across where your 1 inch line is here, and then just bring it back up to your other mark. Take your Dremel tool with your cutoff wheel and just kind of shape in this area. You can use your sanding tool for your Dremel afterwards, just to kind of shape it later afterwards when you get into more material, but for now just take your time in shaping this area. And here's the basic shape that I am looking for to make my recessed section. Now with this here, I found that the corners here were sanded out by the sanding drum for the Dremel tool. I found that it is a very nice diameter size, it's a very nice radius here, so I'm very happy with this. So I'm going to keep this shape. So you can see though, you want to make your lines nice and straight, keep it even as possible, and just be patient with it, take your time, and then it should come out just like this. Next, you're going to want to draw a line on your 1 3/75 aluminum tube here. It may be best if you want to keep the slip joint washers off after you're done washing this tube. So you won't have to keep taking them on and taking them off, as I have already learned. So once you get your line here, put your slip joint washers back on and reassemble your handle. Now as you can see on my aluminum tube here, I have my pencil mark going up and down. That it also matches up with my marker here on my epoxy filled ring. You want that to match up as best as you can, and make sure that all your rings here are close together, that this edge here is flush, that nothing's really popping out much. If you have any gaps on here, don't worry about it. You know, we're probably going to fill that in later, but I'll show you that later. Because now we're going to work on our handle pattern. In the tutorial here, you're going to find your handle and grip pattern, and your emitter vent pattern, and your cube placement patterns. Print these out. Under your handle pattern and your grip pattern here, this line is not on the handle pattern itself. Take a ruler, bring it up against this line, and draw a pen mark straight up on your handle pattern here. So this way you can find even center. Cut out your handle pattern and tape it right onto the aluminum tube. Make sure that your lines here all match up as shown here. When you cut out the handle pattern here, make sure that you take your Dremel tool, the cutoff wheel, and cut right on the paper itself. Don't go outside the paper, cut it right on the paper and take your time with it. When you're also cutting this out, remove this entire bottom section. Alright, now I have the rough cut here of my handle, but I'm going to show you a few pointers on how to make this easier for yourself. One, when you tape on the handle pattern onto your aluminum tube here, do not tape down the corners here, but take a marker and mark off your corners. So when you start cutting, that you do not lose these markings here. You want to do that for down here and up here as well. Now to get these nice rounded corners here, here's what you're going to do. Let's change over to this one. Take your cutoff wheel and do your normal cuts as shown on the bottom and when you're coming down the wall over here. Now when you get down to where your corner is, do not go right up against the corner, or else that'll give you a square edge. But instead, you get close to it from the bottom, and from the top, you're going to want to get close to it as well. And when you start coming down to this section here, give it a cross cut, just like this. So you're going from this point here to this point here. Now when you start trimming out this area here, take your cutoff wheel and just make a couple cuts in close to the corner, and then just slowly start shaping it in just like this. So this way it'll give you a nice rounded corner. You're going to do the same thing for up here too. the other side, and the other bottom here as well too. Now I still have to deburr this, so I'm going to use my sanding drum for this to take off all my burrs and give it a nice clean finish.